Well, we are past the 6-month mark of the war in Ukraine, and neither side seems to be backing down here. Vladimir Putin now making veiled threats that Russia is willing to use nuclear weapons, despite repeated warnings against that escalation from Western leaders. Joining us now to talk about what's been going on, Dr. James L. Regans, Regents Professor and Director of the Center for Intelligence and National Security over at OU. Good morning to you, sir. How are you doing?
Good morning, Jason. Doing well. It's a pleasure to meet you and talk to you.
Pleasure to meet you as well and talk to you. And I feel like this is something that has kind of faded from the public consciousness here in the United States when it comes to the war in Ukraine. Do you feel that same way, where there was a lot of talk about it at the beginning, but here we are 6 months later, and I don't think Americans are paying attention?
Well, you know, I think it's a yes and no in the following sense, that when the war started almost 7 months ago, the assumption was that Ukraine would be done in a week. And if you look at it, Ukraine, in fact, 7 months into the war, is now launching successfully counteroffensives. I don't think it's time to break out the champagne. I don't think it's time for a victory parade. But Putin's really on the back foot. And the question is, what comes next?
And that is the big question here. What's happening now? I mean, here we are 7 months later, like you said, and it seems as if Russia isn't doing as well as it thought it would be doing at this point. What's coming next in this conflict?
Well, first of all, if you look at it, Russia, its strength was really based on two things. The assumption that Russia was a military superpower, and secondly, that it was an energy superpower. Well, if you look at it right now, the Russian military performance has been abysmal. Okay, their weapons haven't worked as well. Their doctrine hasn't worked. Ukraine did a really brilliant strategy of saying, we're going to launch our attack in the south. They emphasized Kherson. And yet when they launched out of the Kharkiv region, they've succeeded in rolling back the Russians significantly. You've had thousands, tens of thousands of Russian troops walk away, die, be wounded. So, you know, Putin's suddenly having to say something he never wanted to do. I'll do a mobilization. Once again, he's rattling his nuclear saber. Is it possible that nuclear weapons will be used? Possible, yes. Likely, no. In fact, the greater risk has been an accident at the nuclear power plants that the Russians have seized and where they've shelled, a radiological disaster. But that's a real red line, not for Putin crossing, but for the U.S. If he launches any nuclear, uses what sometimes people call a tactical nuclear weapon, a low yield, that's a red line for the U.S. because if we do nothing, that sends a powerful signal to Iran, to North Korea, to China. And so at the end of the day, that's something that I don't think Putin really does want to, as much as he tells the Russian public it's a war against the West, it's NATO after us. There's a difference. You couldn't get a flight out of Moscow yesterday if you were a young guy. Mm-hmm. All the flights were sold out.
Yeah, and with this this troop mobilization, 300,000 troops, it seems like a lot of folks, a lot of younger folks are, as you mentioned, trying to get out of the country. They don't want to be a part of this. What is Russia's morale right now? The Russian people, what are they thinking about this this escalation?
Well, it's interesting if you watch the media, if you watch what's out there, you see that really, to date, they're having to recruit in prisons. Okay, probably the only Russians who are really willing to fight for Russia right now are either mercenaries in the Wagner group or people who are getting out of jail. Okay, the younger people in St. Petersburg, the younger people in Moscow, they've been basically untouched by this. So it's really been more of their provinces, things like that. It's going to be, for Putin, the changes, if changes come, the pressures will be inside Russia, not the West pressing Putin, but really the internal pressures on Putin. What
are the chances here that he does just concede and decide to pull back and say it's not worth it? Okay.
Well, anyone who has the hubris to say, I know what's going to happen absolutely, probably is somebody who yells and screams on Sunday morning talk shows.
Right.
All right. That said, right now for Putin, he said it was just a special military operation. No need to mobilize. Over very quickly. So you can see it's spun out of control. His best troops have been chewed up. They deployed the better part of 200,000 of his ground troops when they first went in. They've lost a lot of officers. They've lost a lot of men. They've had people walk away. The Ukrainians are wise. They're leaving that bridge, the land bridge, out of Russia open that crosses the Sea of Azov, because that's a way out for the Russians. Ultimately, if Ukraine takes that back, they'll take out the bridge.
I want to ask from our perspective here in the United States. We're looking to give Ukraine another $12 billion here. President Biden and the Biden administration asking for another $12 billion here. I feel like there are folks here that are watching that are wondering where that money's going. Why are we giving so much to the Ukraine? They don't quite understand. Can you tell us the why? Why is the U.S. supporting Ukraine with so much cash?
Well, in reality, I don't think it's so much cash. If you look at that number compared to what we've used, for example, for COVID relief, if we look at that number compared to what we've used for stimulus recoveries, things of that nature, and I'm not saying it should not have been spent that way, but I'm saying the $12 billion compared to what we spent over 20 years in Afghanistan or Iraq, one thing the Ukrainians have demonstrated, they're a real country, they're a real nation, and they're a people mobilized to fight for their freedom. If, in fact, Putin wins, we as a country lose. It will probably have a shattering effect on our relations with Eastern European countries like Poland, who are fighting in terms of support, the Baltic countries. So I think we have a significant interest both in Ukraine and the implications for Ukraine losing when we deal with China, when we deal with Iran. So it's not just Ukraine, and it's not just an investment in Ukraine. It's an investment, in fact, in our values as Americans.
Okay, an investment to our future as well.
Absolutely.
All right, Doctor, we appreciate your time
Hey,
and your
thank you,
expertise.
Jason.
Thank you so
Pleasure.
much. Appreciate the conversation here this morning.
Enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
All right.